right, that was my first time seeing that too. That was pretty awesome, huh? I'd like to bring a couple people up here to have a conversation about water. If we could have Paul come back to stage, please. Also like to invite, well, first of all, let's get a big hand for Paul here as the executive producer. Awesome stuff. Also like to have Tim Neeves, director and co-producer of Brave Brew World and founder of Prospect Arts. And Drew Fitzgerald, co-founder of 501c3 and Just Water. We are going to take some questions from the audience, so please be thinking about what you'd like to ask these folks. Paul, again, congratulations here. You're also founder of Blue Tech Research. We saw a lot of technology in this film, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Is technology really the ultimate answer to water problems?
Well, I think when you're a scientist, you kind of think it is. And I love technology, but I also recognize that it is only one part of the puzzle, really, and you need technology, you need policy, you need finance, and you need people. And I think engaging people, and Tim, that's something that you helped us to do, was to warm this up so that people can relate to it, because then you get all the ingredients that you need.
Yeah, sure. Tim, as a filmmaker, I'm really curious about what you knew about water before taking on this incredible project and going across 5 continents and going to these places versus what your perspective is now on water.
Well, I'll be honest and say before we started this project, I didn't really know very much about water. Other than the fact that obviously over the many years I've been making films, I've traveled a lot to nations that really struggle with water scarcity and sanitation. So when Paul asked us to work on this film, it was a really exciting opportunity for us to get on board of a story that is very close to our hearts, which is providing safe water and sanitation for the most needy people around the world, but also recognizing that and this is I suppose answering the question of what have I learned along the way is, wow, in the UK I didn't realize we're about 25 years away from our own day zero. So where I've been seeing families in Africa and other places walking for days to collect water and struggling with lack of clean water and sanitation, actually in the UK in 20 years, unless industry wakes up with innovation and the government kind of make changes, then we may run out ourselves. So it was just incredibly exciting to see the army of innovators that we've talked about over this last year, and meeting the wonderful family. I can't see very many faces because of the lighting in here, but for those of you who we filmed with, what a great group of people you are, and just want to thank you for your support for this incredibly important story.
Sure. Drew, you're involved working with Jaden Smith, and we were talking before about kind of the younger generation, and it got to it at the end of the film there. I wonder what your thoughts are on, where this issue resides with them, and what can happen by building their awareness about water.
Well, I think one of the reasons that Jade and I wanted to get behind this film was because there's a lot of content out there that's relatively negative. It paints forward about Armageddon-ish appearance. And when Paul reached out to me on LinkedIn and described it, I was like, wow, this is a really solutions-based story, right? And with Jaden and his generation, and Jaden is pretty steadfast about, we are the get it done, can do generation, right? We look at like Greta, and we look at Boyan Slot, and we look at Dave Hackins, and we look at all these people that are entrepreneurs, and that when we pair great storytelling with authentic and knowledgeable understandings of energy, food, water, and shelter technologies, you start to enrapture a movement. And as we see all the climate strikers, and we see what Greta's really starting to galvanize, Greta Thunberg, and her being recognized for her impact on the world just recently, we start to see a generation that says, you know what, you guys got us into this problem, you're sticking us with the bill, so we're gonna get to work on this, whether it's energy, whether it's food, whether it's water, whether it's criminal justice reform, whether it's gun control. You start to see this generation as a much brighter, much sharper, much quicker to catalyze and act. And so stories like what these guys have put together is something that will just evangelize, and it'll start to make them even more empowered, more knowledgeable, and to be stewards and part of the movement. So kudos to you guys for really getting this done.
Paul, as I was watching the film, I was having this thought, and then it was touched on at the end, so nice job with the storytelling. You see these great solutions, right? Whether it's in the developing world or the developed world. It's like, wow, that is a fantastic idea. That makes loads of sense. Or, but so what's really the key to getting these things to spread, to getting them to be adopted on a wide scale? Okay, here's a palette of solutions. How do we get them put in place? You're here to solve this all.
I think it's been, what I think is when you see it can be done, it's, when someone breaks a world record to run a mile in a certain time limit, then suddenly people go, oh, wow, you can do that. And people do it because someone else has proven psychologically that you can break that mental barrier. And I think that breaking those mental barriers is a big part of what is happening when people look at Orange County. I mean, outside tonight we were drinking beer that you kindly organised that was made from wastewater. And that breaks down a mental barrier in people's minds. And really that's the barrier. And if you can get people to say, whoa, that's possible? Oh, that's cool. Why aren't we doing that? Because that seems to make a lot of sense. If you can get people having that type of discussion.
And that's the whole point in the film, right? Is to get those ideas out there and inspire people. So.
And there's a lot of democratize it. For every one that we've shown here, there are hundreds. And I think that's the grassroots piece. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So, Tim, again, you were on this fantastic journey kind of around the globe into all these incredible situations and scenarios. What were some of your favorite moments making the film? What really kind of struck you and sticks in your memory?
I've got quite a few. How long we got? So I have to say, when I find myself, being asked about, the work that we do by various friends, and I do talk about this project a lot, and people are like, "Wow, you sound like you work for a water company or something." So I'm obviously learning something, but I think one of the stories that I often tell people is. With Frank Regala in Spain, Andalusia. That was one of the stories that made me feel very excited, actually, to see not only the possibility to clean water in a very energy efficient way, but to be able to produce that byproduct. And I think, someone who has a deep concern for our environment, to think that, with treating wastewater, I mean, how crazy is that? Like our own poo and wee. Glenn Daiger, the Godfather, he educated us on this, how we are actually all drinking dinosaur wee. I thank Glenn for that. It's true. But I think to think that, we can be powering cars. I mean, I feel guilty that I flew in today from London, about my carbon footprint. I actually feel quite emotional about it, to be honest. I'm sure. In fact, I think at Blue Tech Forum I met a guy who's working on creating jet fuel out of algae from wastewater. I mean, that is incredible. So I feel incredibly excited about this film and the journey that we've been on and the stories and the great hope. I mean, you just picked up on it. I mean, there is so much negative, downward spiraling content out there, and that's what I've given my life to, is to try and create upward spiraling content that lifts people's posture to think, do you know what, there is actually hope in this world when you've got so much crap going on with, politics and environment. To actually produce a film like this that hopefully will inspire hope and change.
Yeah, sure. Drew, kind of along the same lines here of what we were just talking about, the younger folks, climate has so much attention from the next generation, right?
Sure.
Do you think that there's capacity for water to fit into their list of actions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the primary, there's a lot of misinformation about really what is causing climate change or what the solutions might be. When we look at, these guys have certainly learned this, but there's some simple things that we can do instead of there's a term we call negawatts instead of megawatts. Just by turning the lights off in cities or having, the equivalent of a Nest thermometer, is a really, really palatable solutions to reduce emissions from one of the largest emitters that we have out here, which is refrigeration and the large global scale lighting that we do. Those are some of the biggest problems. It's not plastic straws. It's not, recycling more, which we should do. But as you start to educate these kids, and you start looking at the term that's been thrown around there, so the carbon footprint, there's something that Jaden and I are very keen to start talking about next year, which is something they call the energy-water nexus. And there's a tremendous amount of energy used in getting the water here. And there was a lot of water that was used in making these jeans. There was a lot of water that was used here doing this. And so we would like to use in popular culture and familiarize the idea of your water footprint on par with your carbon footprint. And what you're going to see getting really trendy next year is sustainable fashion, regenerative agriculture, and what Paul and Tim tipped on, some of the efficiencies that are needed in the manufacturing of large-scale fast fashion. And these guys, Zara, H&M, they're all on it. They're not maybe moving as fast as we'd like, but they know they need to change because they're going to get rejected by a generation of people who are walking with signs, right? And there's going to be people that are just going to reject fast fashion. So there is plenty of room for the water conversation to pervade or to wash over this generation. Sorry, that was awful. And I think that when you start looking at climate change, you're going to look at it from an energy, food, water, and housing standpoint. And that's what, from now until I die, that's what Jade and I are going to do.
Yeah. Water and climate are very intertwined.
Yeah,
so
100%.
It's kind of shining a light on that fact, right?
Absolutely.
We want to see if anyone out there might have a question for the folks up here. Is anyone?
We saw in the movie a lot of innovators creating viable business models and creating, viable products from wastewater and water treatment. So what is it that we're missing right now from the wide-scale implementation of these technologies, if they are, financially viable?
Well, yeah, the business model is key. Drew, some of the work that you and Jaden did was to be able to allow a community to produce a product and take the money and put it back in to replace the leaking pipes that provided more water, and it creates this kind of virtuous cycle. And we saw lots of examples in the film on that. And I know if Gary was here, that's exactly what he would be saying. It's about the microfinance. They took the concept of microfinance and they applied it to water. So then it's scale. It's scale. And I think it's like unlocking a key to a door. Once you show how it's done, then you can do more of it. But it's a bit, I would say, a bit like the early adopter curve. These are new ideas. And we're at the early adopter stage of that. But over time, it should make sense because it can be economic. It is economically advantageous to do it this way.
Drew?
Yeah, there's also something that is in the when you're talking about water technologies that want to go out into the market. Right now, they live as ideas at Caltech or Stanford or MIT, and there's something that we call the valley of death, which is, hey, I'm really smart and I have an idea for water, but it's going to take me 3 years to prove it out and get it to the market. Right? There is no money for that guy or girl to make it there. And so it's what we call, that's the valley of death. If you can cross the valley of death, you're lucky enough to get your idea out of the lab and into the market, and market-based solutions are pretty much what that entire movie was about. Then that's how we start speeding the really, really small. We have all the science on the planet right now to fix everything, right? It's just not out in the market, and the market-based solutions aren't out there. So one of the things to solve what they call the investment gap that threatens the universe is, believe it or not, philanthropic capital. And in the U.S., there's more philanthropic capital than the gross domestic product of like Saudi Arabia or something I read. It's like 600 billion, right? So 30 billion of that goes out every year, but almost 0.002% went to anything climate related. And you're like, why? What's the deal with that? And you talk to all these foundations, and they have climate change as one of their top priorities, right? Because all the people that are solving the problems are for-profit companies, and nonprofits don't feel like they can give money there. So one of the things that I got Mom and Dad, Jada and Will's foundation to do is to fund a group called Prime, which helps educate philanthropies and educate innovators that they can play nicely together and that it's not illegal to do that. It's this concept in the US tax code called the program-related investment. So to your end of business models, there was a really smart girl at MIT who figured this thing out and was like, I'm gonna start a company with that, right? And then when you look at Gary, and they're talking about microfinancing to help pull these people out of like a downward spiral of water, it's just creativity. These are tools that have been in the tax code for 60 years. The idea of finance and loan has been around since the Egyptians. It's just smart people looking at these and looking at it with a how can I use existing tools in a more aggressive and dominant way. So that's a weird business model. Go look up Prime Coalition if you really want to learn about that. It is a baller. Sorry, that's a long one.
No, awesome information. Thank you. Other question out there? I see one right here in the middle.
Well, this is more a comment than a question, but I'll turn it into a question toward the end. Thank you so much for choosing LA for the premiere. LA is the new epicenter of recycled water, just up the coast from Orange County. But I love the two comments, metaphors that one that Paul talked about in the beginning, which is the lighthouse, this amazing civil servant that asks for nothing in return, and love how you ended the film with that. And then this idea from the fellow from NASA, because we sometimes look for a way to explain why the value of recycled water is so important. And the comment of the dinosaur clearly makes sense, but we don't always use it. But this idea of the finite of a water cup, a glass of water, that you begin with a glass of water and you can end with a glass of water, that's a great way to illustrate the value of recycled water. So thank you for that.
Yeah, there's this little museum I go to all the time, and there's a space part of it, and there's a sign that regarding the space station. It says, "Today's coffee is tomorrow's coffee," and I always love that. I think I've tweeted it like a half dozen times, but.
Michael Flynn is actually here this evening, so if anyone wants to talk to him about this, he tells fantastic stories about the astronauts and their initial reaction to this. But you get used to it pretty quick.
Other questions? Another one here?
Yeah, Travis, thanks. Just building on my colleague's comment on the glass of water and how consumers connect and can personalize things, like with Hydroloop, suddenly that's in their home. What we've done is such a good job with delivering water that consumers don't even know that they're delivering in and outside of their house the amount that weighs the same as a small car every day. They would never do that if they actually had to haul it in from the grocery store. So I'd be interested in your perspectives, gentlemen, on how do we reconnect consumers with water to create that awareness of how much they're using and a sensitivity and a movement that causes them to be more efficient.
I'm not sure I can answer that question, but I just think that you made a very interesting point there about, if we had to move water ourselves, we'd think a bit more sensitively about it. I was in Kenya a week ago, no, not a week ago, about a month ago, so I'm a little jet lagged. You might have noticed. And filming a family who walked 8 hours every day to collect water from a dried out riverbed. Now that family, I mean, they really know the value of water. They really did. But to answer your question, I'm not sure how, without a film like this that educates, and without I guess what you guys as the industry are doing in telling your story through your like the OC guys, the way you're educating your people living around you. I think that's the only way we can do it, is by telling the story, sharing it.
Storytelling is crucial. Storytelling and technology on equal footing is the solution to getting a generation that's going to put the market-based forces saying, hey, Coca-Cola, get your act together. Hey, H&M, get your act together, or I'm going to leave. And I'm going to tell all my people and make TikToks about it and all that kind of Half the room doesn't know what TikTok is. My 12-year-old daughter's taught me all about TikTok. Is that there's a massive power in numbers, and there's a massive power about educating these kids in this generation to know how much control they have, and just don't have them misguided by not seeing a movie like this. Understanding it's doable. This is a can-do movie.
Yeah, I mean, as a water communicator, it's a big challenge all the time. And I think that in water-stressed parts of the United States, at least, right, California, Arizona, whatever, there's been really a great increase in stewardship and kind of personal conservation. But then in those areas that are water-rich, back east where I am, how do you get people to conserve water? Should they conserve water? It's complicated, but then there's the climate energy connection too. There's moving this water that's using a lot of energy, so maybe there's points to be made on that front. Don't know. Other questions out there? We have one over here. We have a check.
You get a car.
Yeah, it's very important because this is a global message. So, thankfully, we've 6 languages as so far. I believe we've Mandarin, Hindi, Arabic, Portuguese, Spanish, French, and Japanese. So that's a good start. Hopefully, we can build on that. We do foresee that this is the beginning of a journey. Many people have said there's possibly a series of 6 episodes where you unpack too much water. That's a problem. Food and water. That's a problem. Energy and water. So there are different segments we'd like to develop. Plus, as well as the subtitles, is to bring it to a global audience. And that is something that we will be looking for some support for some partners on. Yeah.
Get his card.
So, Tim,
Yeah.
this is
Thanks, Drew.
this is Glenn Diger, and Tim. Yes, it's we are drinking a recycled dinosaur pee. That's all we're doing. So,
Great.
It's delicious.
I'd like the group to think about a point in the future where we have a rich water world, and the question is, what do we need to be doing in the next decade? What's our agenda over the next decade to make that happen? We can get there. What do we need to be doing in the next 10 years to get to that rich water world where everybody has the water and sanitation, and we have a beautiful environment?
It's a big ask. I think you could. I think there's a symphony of answers that come from everything up to a policymaker to environmental law, and it really comes on what your strong suit is. I personally am a free market guy. I'm also an innovation guy, and so for me, where I would put my shoulder into that is very similar to what I was talking about before, which is helping these innovations get to markets and helping entrepreneurs that are working in sanitation, low-cost sanitation solutions in the developing world. There's hundreds of them right here in America, and they need support, they need awareness, they need storytelling ability, they need capital, whether they're philanthropic or nonprofit. I come from the disposition of get innovations into the market and help entrepreneurs go there. Tim might come from a different storytelling standpoint, as might Paul. Sorry, I put you on the spot.
No, I think look, I've been a conduit for this as much as anything, this project. And in fact, the minute you put it out to the universe, the minute you see the groundswell of support, you know you're onto something. Because the support came from so many different directions. And if you look at the variety of people in the room here today, we have people who come from a media background, a film background, a finance background, corporations, technologists, academics. That's what you need to do, and this is a great conduit to bring people together so that you can bring the finance to bear and the policy. So I think that everyone here, and hopefully in the after party, can start to spark some ideas about what you think we can do with this. Because I think we're at the beginning of a journey, and it's unfolding, and we're, I think we're finding out and discovering this with everybody that's been a part of it. So I'd welcome opportunity to discuss that with you guys.
And I think attaching the water story to the environment story, I think, is a really key thing. When I heard, I think it was this weekend, I live in the divided United Kingdom. And I know it's a similar problem over here in the US. I mean, it's a very, very divided nation. And yet in the UK, 80% of our population are passionate about seeing a change in the way we treat our environment to climate change. And so I think if there's a way to attach, because it's a clear link. I mean, I'm terrible with statistics, but someone will probably shoot me down if I say a large percentage of energy in the US, it relates to the moving, heating and treating of water. And so if you want to deal with the carbon footprint here in the US, then you have to tackle the way that water is treated, and that's doing it locally, and it's a lot of the stuff we've seen here. So I think if there's a way to educate people that actually water is a really integral part of the environmental debate, then that's the way to get it higher on the agenda.
I think we have maybe time for one more question here. Yep, over on this side.
System. It's the largest in the world. We just expanded it to 130 million gallons a day. So, but that's not my question. Just a little advertisement for ourselves. The beautiful film, very inspiring, wonderful, but there's my question was on the politics of water. Because often you find when the Orange County Water District decided to do the groundwater replenishment system, it faced a lot of resistance from the community itself, saying, well, we're not going to be drinking this, recycled water. So the local communities tends to resist. You find often projects that city councils tends to resist. And you see this from a local level to also larger state level. Desal, for example, desalinated water, that you've got environmental groups sometimes are concerned about the impact on the ocean. So it is quite complicated sometimes. So I'm wondering, in your journey, if you didn't touch really on the politics of water, but if your journey, maybe you can explain a little bit about that. So thank you.
I'll just jump in quickly and say that it's the unsung work. Technology can be exciting and sexy, but some of the other work on policy is equally important. And we're delighted tonight that we've got Paula Kehoe from San Francisco Water here with us, who did some incredible work in San Francisco on policy, to be able to change regulations, to allow change to happen, because it was holding it back. So that vision and that slow and steady work to open things up is really important. The people piece, you mentioned the pushback. So when we went to Singapore, what blew my mind was, while we were touring the new water plant, there were children going through on school tours. It's in the curriculum at school. But also there were newly minted, what they called newly minted Singaporeans, that when you became a Singaporean citizen, you went to the new water plant. I mean, where on earth does that happen?
I just, from a communications perspective, I'd say that communications and outreach and education is really key. I think there was an annual poll done about water perceptions. It's by the Value of Water campaign, which we're a part of, and they asked about water reuse this year for the first time, and there was a very low percentage of people that really were familiar with the concept, and I think it was something like 12% of people even knew what it was. El Paso, Texas is going to be the first city in the United States to go direct distribution, aka toilet to tap. We don't like that phrase. But they've done such a good job educating their customers about this process and about the technology and about how clean that water is, that 85% of the people in El Paso say, bring it on, send that to my house, I'll drink it. So I think that's just been through a lot of education and a lot of outreach. That it takes time, but that's a key. All right, I think we're going to wrap this portion and head to the next part of the party, but I wanted to ask one final question here. For people that see the film, what do you want them to go do after they see this movie?
I want people to value water.
Yeah.
I want people to be more encouraged to go into STEM careers.
To paraphrase Glenn Duggar, as I often do, demand better. It's there.
Great. Well, thanks to these three. Thank you all for being here. Here's to a brave blue world.